everyone, I'm Crystal Ann B. Amistoso. I'm going to discuss to you my topic which entitled Poetry as a Shape. Under poetry as a shape are imagery, voice, and experience. How to understand the rule of poetry in aspects of first, mind. Under mind, we have here voice and imagery. The second one is body or shape. And the third one is soul or experience. So what is a poetry? From Merriam-Webster Dictionary, poetry is something that is very beautiful or graceful. According to Robert Frost, poetry is when an emotion has found its thought and the thought has found words. According to William Wordsworth, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And to Dylan Thomas, poetry is what makes me laugh or cry or yawn, what makes my toenail twinkle, what makes me want to do this or that or nothing. In other words, when we say poetry, it is a literary work written in verse, in particular of high quality, beauty, emotional sincerity, intensity, or profound insight. Another is poetry, an art of writing, creative, persuasive, and aesthetic form of literature. Poetry, a language that is organized by rhythm. Why people write a poem? I have three reasons why people write a poem. First, to express emotion or feelings. It talks about love, anger, doubt, fright, revenge, or hate. The second one is to tell a story. So, under that is tragedy, drama, or comedy. For the last one is to influence belief and principle about life, whether it is in political, philosophical, or social. Now, let us discuss poetry as a shape. Poetry as a shape meaning studying the form, studying the whole structure of the poem. In studying the whole structure of a poem, there are things to consider. First, number one is genre. In genre, meaning to say, it is a type or category of the poem. It determines the style of work. So in determining the category of a poem, the reader must be aware of the pattern used. Example, lyric poetry, we have your elegy, haiku, ode, and sonnet. For narrative poetry, allegory, ballad, burlesque, and epic. And for dramatic poetry, we have your monologue and soliloquy. Number two to consider is analyze the sound and rhythm. Sound and rhythm determine the meter. The rhyme scheme and the pattern in of the poem will identify if there is alliteration. Sound and rhythm affect the poem. For number three, how the ideas are presented. Ideas are presented. It is marked by stanza, by rhyme, or by shifting the subjects or in shifts in perspectives. So, you may ask yourself, how do these parts relate to each other? How are they appropriate to the poem? Another is how the content is divided. See if there's any progression, like a story having simple events up to the climax, or it tells a past event up to the present from one place to another. Now, let us discuss poetry as experience. Meaning to say, we're going to understand the content of the poetry. So, you may ask, what ideas is talking about? About the content, about the poem. What does the poem foretells? So, these are the questions that you encounter we're going to use in understanding the content. In understanding the content, there are things to consider. Number one is the title. Of course, always remember that the title is very important in making a poem. Why? It's because title it serves first impression. Another title it give you ideas that the poem will do. So after reading the poem, you will want to come back to the title in order to consider further its relationship with the poem. Another thing to consider in understanding the content is the subject. Why? Because subject is the central focus of the poem. Subject is the main idea which the character can be or an object for an event. Another is the situation. For a writer, it's important that you know what are the situation that you're going to put in your poem. Inside the poem includes questions such as first, what is going on or in it? Who is talking? What is saying? To whom? What circumstances? Where? What about? Why? So these are the questions inside your poem. It is said also that in situation, sometimes it is tangible or intangible. Another to consider is symbolism. Poem is highly compressed idea. Each line may consist of different ideas and symbol that may represent different ideas in one word. A word can mean a lot of things. For number five consideration is allusion to figures. When we see allusion, these are very brief references in a poem or other text that do not get much explanation from the author. Another is that allusion are direct and the author directs the reader's attention to something very specific. Allusion are a quick and simple way for authors to convey meaning to the reader. And the last one, allusion is a reference, typically brief, to a person, place, thing, event, or other literary work with which the reader is presumably familiar. So here are some common examples of allusion in everyday speech along with the source material to which they reference. First, his smile is like kryptonite to me. So the source material to which the reference is from Superman's weakness. Another, for number two, that guy is young, is creepy, and hungry. So the source for that or the reference is from Hamilton. I wish I could just click my heels from the Wizard of Oz. And for number four, his job is like pulling a sword out of stone from King Arthur legend. And for number five, I am listening to the king. The reference is Elvis Presley. So these are the common examples of allusion in everyday speech. For number six to consider are the author. A poet is someone who writes a poetry. So, as a reader, it's important that you have a background knowledge about the author so that you can understand what was the poem all about. In understanding the content, the reader should be aware of the author. Identify what you know about the poet. What year did poet write the poem? What time he lived? Is he classical or is he existentialist? Another thing to consider is the author's attitude. Why? Because the way an author or character thinks or feels about the subject he is writing on. It includes also the personality of the author towards his or her philosophy, principles, living, or to the society. Another, it also includes if he is serious, relevant, ironic, satiric towards to his work. Another is word choice. Strong, carefully chosen words, also known as diction, ensures that the finished work is cohesive and imparts the meaning or information the author intended. Poet choose words very carefully, so the reader can easily identify how prolific the author in using language, whether he is native or not. Weak word choice creates confusion and dooms a writer work to fall short of expectation or fail to make its point entirely. So, the next one is the figures of speech. When we say figures of speech are the sets of words that are formed due to alteration in the conventional syntax and their purpose is to emphasize on something, expressing a feeling and to provoke any idea. Figures of speech, it adds beauty or it using figures of speech, the beauty of a message is enhanced. Another, the message become more understandable with use of just few words. Now, let us define or let us discuss poetry as a voice, meaning to say poem execution. So, voice refers to a specific style an author writes in. This includes the way they use point of view, tone, rhetorical devices, syntax, and more. When we say poem execution, meaning poem writing, reciting. Poem execution or reciting the following, readers should consider the following. First, the mode. When we say mode, the mode affect the writer's words on the reader. How the writer's words make us feel. The climate of feeling in a literary work. Another is the sound. The manner in which a poet makes his statement, it reflects his attitude toward his subject. It expresses feeling or attitude that influence how the reader feels about the characters, events, and outcomes. An attitude toward the poem or story and reader. Another is punctuation marks. Punctuation marks is very important because the meaning can possibly be changed if there is a wrong and pause and stop. Offer enormous help in conveying the relations of one part to another. It also allows active reading by sparking up questions from the readers. But most importantly, punctuation provides emphasis and prevents confusion. It divides a written text for a clearer delivery of a discourse, and it should be always be part of your editing checklist. Another is the rhyme scheme. It's the ordered pattern of rhyming words at the end of each line of a poem. This pattern is leveled using capital letters such as common A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. So I have here an example. For example, for this, let me read. Here was a young man so benighted, he never knew when he was slighted. He would go to a party and eat just as hearty as if he'd been really invited. You will notice the rhyme scheme is AA, BBA. Because you will notice, benighted and slighted are the same. So you're going to mark A. Party and hearty, we put letter B because they are similar. And invited, since invited word is similar to benighted and slighted, you will mark letter A. So that is the rhyme scheme of this poem. Another is the proper stresses. An emphasis that falls on a certain syllables and not others. Proper stresses, meaning to say, the arrangement of stresses within a poem is the foundation of poetic rhythm. Okay. Another for number 5, loud and clear. It is important to be heard clear because it implies to the listeners in understanding the content and the message of it. Do not eat your voice. Another one is do not read fast or too slow, which can also catch the attention of the listeners. Now, let us come to additional tool for poetry. Next is poem appreciation or reading and understanding poetry. First is imagery in poetry. Imagery is simply defined as the property of language by which a poet paints a picture with words. In poetic sense, encapsulates all the expressions of language that appeal to our senses, be touch, smell, taste, sight, or sound. Imagery is a mental pictures and the language that presents them, according to Monica Mojica. Second is the senses of minds. When we say senses of mind, it is which is analogous to physical senses. So we have here major senses. First is sight. When we say sight or visual sense, it focuses on our sense of seeing. I have here an example. Thy black cylindrical body, golden brass and silver steel. And from the excerpt from T.S. Eliot's, on broken blinds and chimney pots, on the corner of the streets, a lonely cab horse steams and stumps, and the lightning of the lamps. So these are the examples of sight or visual sense. Another is hearing or oral sense. This focus on the sense of hearing. Let me give you an example of oral sense. So I have here, hear the ringing, the jingling of bells. Another example from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as someone gently rapping at my chamber door. So these are the examples of hearing, sense of hearing. For the third one is the smell or olfactory sense. It pertains to our sense of smell. Example, Sampaguita scent and fragrance. And another example from the poem by B.I.H.W. Longfellow called Rain in Summer. They silently inhale the clover-scented gale and the vapors that arise from the well-watered and smoking soil. Another example, for number 4 is the taste or the gustatory sense, or it focus on the sense of taste. Example, the sweetness of sterile fruit. Or from first stanza from Jonathan Swift cooking poem, gently blow and stir the fire, lay the mutton down to roast. Dress it nicely I desire, in the dripping pot a toast, that I hunger may remove. Mutton is the meat I love. So that These are the examples of sense of taste or gustatory sense. Another is thermal sense. Thermal sense, it's focused on heat or cold. Example, St. Agnes Eve, better chill it was. It is the day that makes a summer. So, since it's summer, meaning to say it talks about heat. Another sense is the motion or kinesthetic sense. It is used when a writer wants to convey a particular experience, one that readers should be able to visualize things their text, a poetic device that gives a feeling of natural or physical bodily movement or action like breathing, heartbeat, and a pulse. Example, the train of cars behind, obedient, merely following, or a mute or revolving wheel. So this is an example of emotion. Another example is from the Measure for Measure by William Shakespeare. This sensible warm motion to become, unneeded clod, undelighted spirit, to bathe in fairy floods, or to reside in thrilling region of thick rive ice. So, as you can read, these examples of kinesthetic sense. Another is touch or tactile sense. The poet appeals to the reader's sense of touch by describing something that the speaker of a poem feels on their body. It may include the feel of temperature, texture, and other physical sensation. Example, I shall go shod in silk. Or another example, as she wiped the sweat from her brow, she realized her skin was just as cold and sticky. Next is for number three. So those are the major senses. Okay. For the third one, figures of speech. When we say figures of speech is a type of technique that goes beyond the literal meaning of the words, used to create figurative meaning. A figure of speech is a literary device that creates a special effect by using words in more colorful and interesting or distinctive way. So that's all my report. Thank you so much for listening.